The first thing to notice when using our Wonderwell rigs is that some of the time they will come in and you will not have textures on the skin. And there's a reason for that, because unfortunately Maya is finicky about something called UDIMs, which, if anyone does not know what a UDIM is, if you go to the UV editor and I select normal, select his skin, here we go. So if you can see these tiles, each one of these tiles is called a UDIM. So you have UV1, UV2, U3, right? 1001, 1002, 1003. The reason for doing this is just a quality thing, right? Because if you think about it in terms of an image, the bigger the image is, the higher the quality is going to be. If you have a tiny little image down here and you stretch it out, it's going to be pixelated and it's going to be gross, right? So in terms of texturing, having textures within a UDIM is going to allow these to be a lot higher resolution, as opposed to squishing them all within this one little, 2K by 2K texture. So more UDIMs equals higher fidelity textures. The problem with that is that Maya reads higher fidelity textures as being more taxing, and so it automatically disables all UDIM previews. So if you were to render this, it would show up fine, but in the viewport it does not show up. So what you have to do is you have to go to Render, Viewport 2.0, regenerate all UV tile preview textures. Once you do that, there you go. Now the texture shows up. So that's just a handy little tip. Another thing I would suggest is, because his genes are rolled up, that's the back side of the geometry. And so if you do not have two-sided lighting turned on, that's going to show up black, right? And it just doesn't quite look as good. So turning that on is great. And that's not going to affect your rendering either, because two-sided shows up in rendering. So that's just what I do first time I ever open up one of the Wonderwell rigs, is those two things, just to make sure that everything's working properly. So if I start out with the master global control, this is simply just placement, right? So if you need to place your character at a certain position, this is where I'm going to place it, right? I'm going to use this control. Now, if I'm doing some sort of a walk cycle, I'm going to place it here. And if I paste my walk cycle, then I'm going to use this control to make him move forward, unless it's a forward moving walk cycle, in which case the center of gravity control will be moving forward. But having a main control inside of the global is always just very, very handy, because let me go ahead and move this back to the origin. It also allows you to do things where, let's say he's holding onto an umbrella, right? So let's just say he's got his hands. Let's say he's got his hands up there and he's holding onto an umbrella and he's getting swung side to side. I can move this gimbal control down here, move this up here. And now we have a free pivot control where we can rotate Leo however we want. And then all we have to do is just overlap everything below that. So that's kind of the use cases for both of these controls. Also inside of here, you have geotype. So you can set this to reference, in which case there will be no geometry selection. Just switch these back. There we go. Normal will allow you to select the geo. Bin controls. So if you're getting into finer posing detail, these controls will allow you to translate, scale, and rotate. So nice little detail controls there. Secondary controls are even a finer level of detail, allowing you to manipulate within the bin controls. Cloth allows you to turn clothing on and off, and right below that is another important detail. So when having clothing on a character that has skin underneath, there's a propensity for penetration outside of the clothing. So the simplest solution we found for that was to compress the body to an absurd level so that nothing pokes through the clothing. So if you're doing a shot where he has his shirt off, turn off body compression, and that's going to allow him to have his full normal looking body underneath. So here's the second exciting announcement that will be released very soon. We now have our second hair for Leo. We are currently working on finalizing texturing and surfacing on the hair before we release, but for now it looks very, very nice having this hair on him. So that completes what we have on this layout control. So let's just start at the bottom. We have translate, rotate, scale on the foot. We have stretch, squash, which that works for more of the leg. This is more of a leg control. So this allows you to stretch the foot if you want, and it also allows you to squash the leg. So if squash is off, his knee is going to bend. If it's on, it's just going to squash, right? So those are usually default set to stretch on, squash off, because that's usually the most standard case. Save volume, if that is on, it's going to allow the leg to squish, and if squash is on, it's also going to allow it to get really fat when you squish it. So if you're doing a really cartoony shot, volume might be something really nice to do. Soft IK, this is to prevent knee pops, right? So if you can see, if this goes from here to here very quickly, you get what's known as a knee pop, especially in walk cycles. Soft IK, the higher it goes, it basically makes knee popping impossible, because as the leg stretches, the length of the bones actually grows slightly. So that way, as it's coming back, you don't get that pop frame. It kind of bends before you get to that breaking point. So soft AK is a very nice attribute to have when working on a lot of walk cycles. This is scaling for the upper leg, lower leg. Roll weight, this is for the foot roll. So if you foot roll the foot, roll weight will allow you to make the foot pivot from the toe or from the pivot position. You got side roll, heel pivot, rotating from the back, toe pivot, rotating from the middle, toes pivot, rotating from the tip of the toes, and then you have your space. So right now it's in root space, so when you move the root, it follows along. But if I was to move the center of gravity, it's not going to move along. So if I switch that to COG, there we go, moves along. So very handy. So moving up, you got your bendy controls, secondary controls, you got your pull vector. Pull vector just moves the knee around, nothing special there. You can snap, which will allow you, if you're doing a shot where he's on his knees, snapping PV will keep those knees from moving around whenever the legs move. As you go up, you've got your FK-IK switcher, allowing your leg to rotate for more of a flipping or rotating shot. Then you've got your leg hip controls, which is a very nice control. A lot of times when you're animating like this, you'll notice you get intense pinching in this area, especially if the character's wearing some sort of a tunic or some sort of a dress or skirt or something like that. These controls can help alleviate that by rotating. It kind of smooths the deformations out a little bit. You can also, translate, and it allows you just a little bit of extra like polishy detail to keep there from being intense pinching in an area that usually has a lot of pinching. Moving up from the leg hip controls, we have the COG, or I guess we got the hips. Nothing special here, just being able to rotate, move the hips. You've also got the IK hips, which work the same. We got the COG control. Important to note that we have a chest breathing and a belly breathing. So if you know a lot about animation, you'll hopefully you've seen the video about chest breathing and belly breathing that they did for Elsa animation in Frozen 2, I believe, of when you start singing, you're in the belly, and then as you continue to sing and belt out a little bit more, you move up into your chest. It was really, really cool video. I don't know if it's still up, but yeah, we have belly and chest inflation for breathing. We also have FK spine controls. We also have IK spine controls, giving you the ability for both. Something else to note is the pivot Y position. Right now is set here because that's pretty standard for IK spine. When you slide this down to, let's just say something drastic of -7, that's going to place it down here. So as I drag this down, the pivot position of the spine gets lower. Or if I was to go up here, well, now I'm pivoting it from up here. So it's not the most commonly used control, but it can help a lot. Another thing to note, if you're doing a lot of cartoony animation, maybe you don't want this drastic of stretching, so you can turn the save volume all the way to 0, where you're just getting pure stretching, or you can add just a little bit depending on how much you want. Something like this still gives the stretch squash feel, but it doesn't get quite as drastic as one. Moving up from there, we've got shoulders. Very typical here, just being able to translate, rotate. Note that we made sure when you rotate the shoulders up that you get this really nice fleshy feeling on the back of the neck, because a lot of rigs, it tends to feel very dead back here. We got IK, FK switching. So we got FK arms, IK arms, bend controls. On the hand here, it's important to note that we also have same controls as on the foot. So we have hand roll, side roll, roll weight, which allows you to weight the hand. So if you're doing a shot where the hand is placed on a table, you'd be able to get this really nicely roll function. Wrist pivot, tip pivot, tip of the finger pivot, and then we've got space. So if you want it to follow head, chest, COG, or root, you can switch that there. You got your cupping control. This is one of the most underrated controls on any rig. If you're a rigger out there, please add cupping control to rigs. This is an animator's best friend, in my opinion. We've got finger controls and yeah, IKFK switching. So moving back from the arms, we have neck control, being able to rotate. Interesting to note here that we limited the amount of rotation in Y in terms of the base of the neck being able to rotate, even though a lot of rigs have that, because there is no scenario where your neck rotates in Y without your head rotating in Y, right? You can't rotate your neck without your head. So what we have done is we've connected the rotation of Y of the neck to the rotation Y of the head. So when you rotate the head, the neck moves along with it, which just gives for a much more automated deformation on the neck and keeps that weird breakage you see a lot of times in shots where the neck hasn't been rotated in Y properly. So in reality, usually we only animate rotate Z, rotate X, because rotate Y isn't really needed. Although if you did have to, you could grab this neck bend control and rotate it to get something more custom. But by default, rotate Y doesn't really affect much. On the neck control, we also have tension controls. So if you're getting angry, upset, you get that tension in the lower neck. This allows you to yeah, make him feel more stressed out. Adam's apple control, great for sliding the Adam's apple up and down, pulling it out, swallowing, all that good stuff. And then I'm going to skip the face, go to the head real quick. Simple head control. Global on, off, just keeps, follow line. So if you rotate the body, head will stay aligned or not. Eye controls. Parenting will follow the head. Not parenting will keep it in world space. So now for the face controls. Let's just start at the top. We've got, let's go ahead and just select this, put in a display layer. We've got the main brow controls, brow ends. Let's move this to object space. Allows you to get, furrow brow, raised brow, a lot of the emotion in our characters. These controls here, this is for pinching, right? So if you're wanting to do a furrowed brow expression, the simplest way I would suggest doing that on our rigs would be to use these controls, giving more of a pinching effect. And then if you need to, you can even come in here, scale this, pull it out, adding a little more connectivity in the middle brow area. Then you've got your outer brow, and then you've got the tip right here of the brow. Up here you've got your head squash. This is great for more cartoony animation, even great for blinking. If you really want to get some free fleshiness in your shots, adding ever so slightly amount of squash as you blink just makes the upper face breathe just a little bit. This control here, the head up control, this can be used for getting asymmetry in the face. It can be used for dragging the head. It can even be used for scaling. Just fairly useful control for just kind of moving things in the upper head universally. Moving down from there, we have the blink control. You have the blink blend, which will allow you to go from an up blink, down blink. Auto lids. I believe auto lids. I have to look back at what that control does because I can't. Oh, no, I'm dumb. The auto lids function dictates how much they move when the eyes move. So if you set auto lids to 1, when you move the eye movers, they're going to follow very closely, and it's going to look a little bit odd. As you can see, the left one feels a little more natural, a little more fleshy. The one on the right feels kind of stuck, like the eyelids can't move without the eyes moving around. So usually for me, I leave that at about 0.3. You can also translate, scale, rotate this eye control. Inside of that, you have the eyelids, so you can rotate, or I guess you can't translate, but you can rotate the eyelids around the eyeball. So going from there, you've got the actual eyelid controls. You've got the micros underneath here. And then you have the eye crease controls above that. So it's important whenever you're blinking and you close your eyes to pull down these creases to make sure that the entire face is breathing at once. Same for down here, you've got the under crease. So if you're smiling, that crease, that line underneath the eye is going to come up. So if you do this, that does not feel motivated, because what causes this underlid to come up is this crease line under here. So pulling that up, now it feels more motivated, and you can even pull the cheek up to make sure it continues to feel motivated by the cheek muscles, right? So going down from there, you've got inner eye, you've got the flesh right above the nose, got the cheek control, got lower cheek control, you have a cheek puff, which gives just more of a custom sculpted look to the blowing, like holding air in your cheeks, which is really nice. You have your middle squash and stretch control, ear, and then we've got mouth corner. Important to note that there is the Translate Z, which I think a lot of animators neglect to use. One of the most important translation values in the mouth corner is Z, right? Because we don't just translate out, we translate in too. So make sure you use this because it adds a lot to our character. You have the zip attribute, which if I open this, doesn't work. So it's important to know with our system that the zip attribute only works when you've opened up the jaw and not when you've translated the lip controls. So now the zip works. So if I want to do a smile like this and I just want to add a little bit of zip, there you go, something like that. So you've got your sneer controls, you've got your crease controls, being able to sculpt and create just a little more custom creasing on the character. You've also obviously got your micro controls, being able to sculpt custom lip shapes. Let's go ahead and undo this. There we go. Now we've got our lip puff control. Got your lower lip puff control. This is great if you're wanting to do any kind of specific mouth animation of, like, you know, moving your tongue around inside of the mouth. It's a great specific acting choice you can do. You've got your nose tip control. Got your left nostril, right nostril. This just a little tweaker, making sure you can get very specific shapes. And you've got your lower head squash, and you've got your head rotation. And yeah, I think that's it for the Leo rig.